Welcome to the Athletic Edge podcast. I'm your host, Liam Evans, strength and conditioning coach and owner of Evans Performance. This is a podcast tailored for athletes, coaches, and parents interested in every facet of athletic development. Join me and guests from around the world as we dive into game-changing tools and expert insights covering strength training, performance enhancement, and long-term athletic development strategies. Uncover the keys to elevate your athletic potential, drawing from trusted resources to safely and effectively navigate your training and build your athletic edge. All right, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have on Coach Josh Bray, who this is probably the quickest episode we've ever, we confirmed it yesterday and then just straight into it today. So I haven't even sent him any questions or anything like that, but just quickly talking before the podcast, it sounds like we're in a very similar position and probably aligned on a lot of things. So I think it'll be a fun conversation to have. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get into anything, do you want to just give, a quick background of yourself and kind of how you got to where you are in the profession today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll try and keep it brief, but we were talking about this a bit before, my unique position. I grew up on a boarding school campus, and my father being the athletic director, always encompassed with sports, different sports. All my friends or parents' friends were coaches, and I was playing with the older kids and just always interacting with that. So sports in general has always been a part of my life. And being in a small town, there's lots of little opportunities. You're playing with the same people, but there's a university, there's elementary school, high school, and everything. So always toting around and playing different sports. But my transition towards being more in the S&C area probably started with obviously finding a love for the gym. Probably 10th grade, sustained a clavicular injury. And at that time, playing American football. And at that time, I was all I could care about is making it to rugby season, and so I found myself in rehab. It was only a couple of weeks long, but at the time you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to take months. I'm going to have to give up swimming and give up basketball so I can rehab and blah, blah, blah. And anyways, you end up spending a lot of time with the physio, and we had a great physio, took great care of me, but you spend a lot of time on the bike, trying to do every little thing you can to get better. And start consuming content and information on how can I accelerate this rehab process, and you start obtaining all this info and applying it, and your body's changing. And then sure enough, my recovery process is super quick and get to play basketball. I'll have my best rugby season yet, start feeling more confident and realizing the impact that preparation has on your body. Obviously that in conjunction with getting through puberty and everything accelerates and you feel great. But I carried that on through, and when I kind of started to narrow my scope on playing rugby, realizing preparation was a big part of it, helped me through university, playing provincial side rugby, rep rugby, and being okay, this is what's really accelerated my growth and development. And it wasn't really until I left university and tried to pursue a little bit of higher coaching and rugby in New Zealand that, and then I kind of came to the end of my career, and I was okay, what is it that I enjoyed the most about sport? And that was the physical prep side of things. Mm-hmm. I through high school, after transforming my body and getting recognition for that and helping others build programs, or being the guy that everyone asks questions about, how do I train this or that or the other, and having the answer, it just dawned on me that's what I want to do with my life. I want to try and make some money out of it. I enjoy it. It's the most common factor across the board. What do I always have if I go on vacation or new job or new place? Is I got to go to the gym and I got to run. So I was that's my common factor. So got a CPT, and then started working on CSCS, and just reached out to people back home while I was away. And I said, look, this is a skill and a passion I have, and I think you have a hole that I can fill. I have a skill set that I think can highly apply to everybody. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, a couple people got back and gave me the opportunity. So started working at this high school here, started my business online, trying to get as much traction as I could during COVID. and then worked at the university not too far away for 3 years, coaching rugby and being the lead S&C and just getting as much exposure as I could. And now it's just kind of taken off. I wouldn't say a full monopoly, but have my hands in a lot of different buckets around here. I've been asked and approached to do different jobs, and so now as the lead S&C at Bishop's College School for the hockey program predominantly, sports performance head for the Universal Academy, and then, like I said, a couple other little academies, Pineapple Hockey, and then my business CTX training. So it's kind of like the synopsis of what got me here, and that's why I'm here.
So with your hands, like you said, in so many different buckets, what's your kind of day-to-day life looking like these days?
Some days it's great, every day is great, but I'd say during the season, because I'm working at a boarding school, and like the way we do things, like every minute is accounted for. And on that side of things, like in the morning, I also hold the role of a house parent. So I have a house of 23 guys that I take care of. So in the morning, getting those guys out of the house and on to their day, and then rushing off to the academy, run some sessions there. I try and get a nice lift and a run in as best as I can. Then it's back home, program, then to the school for a good 3.5 hour shift, sometimes some extra open gym hours, and then it's home, try and squeeze in a bit more programming, and then repeat. Yeah.
What's so with the school that you're working at right now? Obviously, we're in kind of summer. Are athletes on campus, or are you like? Is there an off-season program, or is everybody kind of gone home so it dies down a bit?
Yeah. So international boarding school, everyone gets out as quick as they can, get back home. Some of these kids don't see their parents all year long, so come from far. So nobody's on campus, fully shut down, and even with the academy, because it's predominantly junior hockey, like they finish up in March, April, May, and they head out. No one on campus, no one around, but lots of online programming, off-season programming, taking care of them through and through until they're done.
So diving a little bit deeper into that, so what are some of the like key areas or key things you're thinking about or looking for when you are going into specifically into like an off-season style program?
Yeah, well, lots of considerations. I think for me, I tend to now I've been adopting more of like a psychological consideration. Like my basis for how I'm approaching things is from psychology, and basically how are these kids going to interact? Like you either have kids going home and they're going with their own trainers or a new gym or whatever it is, their old coaches, which they're bringing them in, and all they're thinking is, okay, it's off season. I'm not really paying attention to their last 10 months of development. So we're going hard, we're doing this, that, and the other. And they're trying to develop all these different physical qualities, which is fine, but it's never in conjunction with where we've come from. So you have to think about that. So like if I am providing something for them that they're going to do on the side, is it going to be too much stress, not enough stress, yada, yada, yada. Then you have your other kids who are, they're going home to their for life fitness, and they barely have anything. They have nobody, and it's all on them. It's their own risk. So how do I provide a program that's gonna, not scare them away? It's gonna tick the box forward, check all the right boxes, and make sure that they're getting stuff done. And then everything in between, right? Kids go on vacations, first time seeing their family, or they don't have access to the gym. So those are all my primary considerations. But from a holistic standpoint, this is one time that stress is greatly reduced. A lot of these kids don't have to work or don't work. They get a little bit of sport action, but it's mainly training, and we've worked hard all year and for a couple of years for a lot of them to kind of generate this mentality around training that they need to do it and they enjoy doing it. So they go home to this stress-free life. They eat really well, they sleep well for the most part, and they get to train. So for me, I'm like, all right, let's add a little bit more S&C stress to their life. So it's typically, we're looking at our strength and hypo blocks and concurrently programming, but one time where I'm like, we're hitting heavy eccentrics, long eccentrics, some long yielding isos, still working on acceleration based stuff, and just having more of the sexy training, if you will.
Because like you said, in the off season they have a lot less of the outside stressors going on, whether it's from their sport, because maybe they're taking a few weeks or a month off. There's obviously not the school stress, and that also plays a big role that I think a lot of sport coaches sometimes can overlook, or any coach for that matter. But it does play a big role in how they adapt and how they function just in general. And then I would love to dive in a little bit to kind of how you break apart your athletes and their qualities, whether it's, a more muscular driven athlete or a more elastic driven. I think you call it bucketing. But first of all, what's your kind of overarching thought process with that? When does it come into play? And then we can dive a little bit more maybe into how it differs between.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's come in different iterations throughout the years. I was speaking to someone about this the other day, where I think I've inherently been doing it for many years now, where I'm giving some sort of nomenclature to it, whether it's bucketing, archetyping,
Yeah.
whatever, But it's just this idea that different athletes have different qualities, and how they express and how they interact with the gym, etc., are kind of currently working together. How I approach it, I usually take the first couple weeks when they come in. Obviously, like for new athletes, just watch how they interact, how they move. You can get a lot from just watching them do a drill. Like you can play
Yeah.
tap, British Bulldog. You can have them try and do a crab walk with a a stick over their head, something like that, and you just have a good sense of like, okay, like these guys are springy, they're
Yep.
more heavy set, or they have different strategies towards jumping and just general problem solving. So it's just going to be a pretty loose, what do you call it? Loose overview, like just
Yeah.
screening. Sorry, a very
Yep.
loose screening, if you will. And then I start putting my list together, and then we're hopping on the force plates. Very fortunate to have that.
Hmm.
Getting an ISO pull in, and then a couple different jumps to see what their force profile is like. And then from there, it's just like they're teenagers. So a huge caveat here is that what you get in September is probably not going to be the same in June. So it's more about creating a true bucket but it's like they're all connected and they're flowing. So you might have a kid come in and like, they're a little pudgy kid who's
Yep.
5'2" and 160 pounds. And by the end of the year or 2 years, they're this tall string bean who's, super elastic. So general approach, loose screening, get them on the plates, start evaluating from different physical quality standpoints, and then start tailoring towards what they enjoy, what they react really well to, and
Hmm. Are
pretty
you
simple.
utilizing, are you doing like some sort of eccentric utilization ratio, or are you just looking at, their how they actually look, how springy they look in different drills and stuff?
No, definitely using eccentric utilization ratio. Do a squat jump and a CMJ for that. Been thinking about sprinkling in some like repeat rebound
Hmm.
jump and drop jump stuff, but
Yeah.
more squat jump and CMJ just to see the difference. And we do it every week, so we can kind of track the progress over time and
Hmm.
see if there's any shift. One is a little more indicative of fatigue at times for RSI mod versus the other one. And you give, if you're having a hybrid athlete as well, or more muscular or elastic, blah, 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 like we'll see those strategies interact differently with the different metrics, and they'll give you different insight week to week
Hmm.
based on fatigue and response to stressors and stuff like that.
How much are you thinking about keeping, their superpower versus maybe bringing up a little bit of their weakness?
Yeah, quite a bit. I have rough like allocations throughout the year of how much time
Hmm.
I'm spending on each one. During the in season, September to October, maybe even November, like, yeah, they're hopping into games right away, but I haven't had them for about 8 weeks. A lot of new players. So the idea is I'm going to try and bring them up to speed. So I kind of front load a little bit more intensity. So we're doing a little bit more weakness training or more
Hmm.
kryptonite training at the beginning of the year. And then we'll settle into our main in season work, where it's like maybe 50-50, maybe a little bit more on strengths, just
Hmm.
because at this age it's like the last thing I want is them to come in and dread what they have to do. And if they can come in and do something that they're good at, and then we can kind of find a medium ground of where, okay, like I'll give you 6 things that you like to do, just give me 4 things that I need you to
Yep.
do. It's a little bit easier, or whatever the ratio is. Yeah, and then off season, by then, if it's been a full season, there's maybe 1 or 2 that don't, but the rest of them by then are pretty confident in the gym and they're ready to work. They understand the value of it. So it's a little heavier on the weaknesses for sure.
Yeah, I often kind of find myself thinking about, obviously it's contextual and it depending on when a kid comes in and if they have any training age or just more than anything like their first time with me. If I know that maybe they are more of an elastic athlete, strength is clearly not their superpower, then even just those initial weeks to build that relationship with them, do stuff that makes them feel comfortable, feel confident, good in the gym, and that I think gets you a little bit of that extra buy-in. So then a couple weeks in we can be like, look, you're a rock star at this and that. I think if we bring up these other qualities, it'll also help that. So then you can kind of have that open line of communication with them.
Well, absolutely. And at this age too, like their strengths are their strengths, but I'd say they're less strengths are more just predispositions, right? Like
Exactly.
they're predisposed to being elastic like naturally, but like even their capacity in that capacity is pretty low. So you get in and you get that springy kid and it's like, okay, like let's make them even more springy, let's make them even quicker, let's teach them a couple things, and then they get improve in what they're already good at. It's like, all right, now let's do this, let's improve your
Mhm.
max strength, let's get this up. And then they're like, oh, okay, and like explain why, and then they get even stronger and
Yeah.
faster, even more springy, and they're like, oh, okay, now I get it, and they're like, oh, I'll do it.
I realized, just not even just to backtrack a little bit, for any maybe a sport coach or even a parent that might be listening, and we've been talking about elasticity and muscular driven and all these things that may not know what that actually means. You want to just give a quick kind of rundown on the difference, or how that visually might present? Because obviously parents and sport coaches see a lot of kids moving around and everybody's moving in a little bit different way. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So predominantly, you see on two sides of the spectrum, like two kinds of athletes. Like you're more muscular driven, and then you're more elastic. So what we mean by muscular is like typically your heavier set athletes are usually pretty wide at the rib cage. They got big muscles. They're more predisposed to having musculature and definition, et cetera, et cetera. They're usually like from a movement standpoint, maybe a little bit on the slower side. They can have really good overall outputs, but what it takes for them to do that is a little bit more. And what I mean by that, say we're just doing like a squat jump or a counter movement jump, they need a big counter movement depth to get up. Maybe it takes a long time to get off the ground to generate all that force. Very hip flexor dominant in the jump strategy, change of direction, and like repeat sprint, stuff like that might be a little bit tougher on them. There your rhino is very armored, right? And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have elastic athletes. So we use the terminology string beans, or very, very tendinous athletes, not carrying a lot of muscle, probably pretty skinny. Psychologically speaking, probably steer away from the gym or find it makes them slow and sore, very narrow. But they're the kids that like you oftentimes you're like, how can they do that? They just spring up and dunk a ball. But because they lack the physical padding, often a little bit more predisposed to injury. And then it's a gray area, and an area I'm looking into a lot more, and a lot of people are, and I think you see it become a little bit more present in older athletes, or like 18 and above, but the hybrid or middle ground athlete, where they have some form, they have good outputs, but their expression isn't quite refined, so they're in a middle ground. But I think you do see this a lot in the younger high school athletes as well. Developmentally, like I mentioned, like you have three different kids in one body. September, December, and June, you could have three different kids, and they kind of progress up and down this spectrum in terms of force curves and expression and yada yada yada. So there's a lot of middle ground kids as well. So in general, from a sideline, if you see the bulky kid, or you have a kid who's a little bit heavier set, and you're concerned with them getting faster, just understand that generally, that genetically they're a little bit more predisposed to expressing force and capacities in general in a certain way, versus your little string bean kid who needs to get stronger. It's not always the easiest thing on either side of the spectrum. I don't know if
Mhm.
that sums it up well enough, but
Yeah, no, I think that was perfect. And obviously, we've already touched that you're working with quite a few different types of sports and types of athletes. So, programming wise, how or how not, does it kind of differ between, sport to sport? not necessarily even just the different athletes and makeups of athletes, but your rugby players versus your hockey players versus basketball, anything else that you have, especially in our demographic, which is younger or high school kind of related athletes.
Yeah. I mean, there's not I don't want to say there's not a huge amount of difference there because like if I have a 12-year-old come in and an 18-year-old, I don't really care what sports they're playing. It's going to be
Yep.
different. But at the same time, if I have a 14-year-old come in and an 18-year-old come in, but they both have 0 years of training experience, it's also going to look pretty similar, right? One just is going to probably have a greater biological capacity to withstand stress versus the other one, but
Hmm.
movement wise, it's probably going to be pretty similar. I think it's pretty well understood by now that we're going to program based on the sport demands, the individual needs, and within respect to the time frames, joint angles, and
Hmm.
capacities necessary to play the sport. So, if I have a hockey player come in and a rugby player come in, I'm really going to make those differences based on their capacity to withstand, so their training age.
Hmm.
Maybe just change things slightly in terms of like maybe velocity or just overall load based on the sporting demands.
Hmm.
But in general, I don't think it's not going to change too much because in the grand scheme of things, especially at the developmental stages, everyone more or less needs the same thing. And like we can sit here and we can talk about like, yeah, well, this person might need this and but those are outliers, right? Like we want to, deal with everyone in the middle bulk part of the curve. So in regards to that, they pretty
Yep.
much all GPP to some degree, and we're just gonna change those variables based on season phase. So to flat out answer your question, it's
Yep.
not gonna change that much. It just the means are going to change slightly.
Yep, exactly. And you, I assume, especially in the high school setting, are working with how many athletes at a time?
25 to 1
Yeah.
probably. It's a regular ratio, yeah.
So what would that look like as far as like just a, not to go too into details, but just a general session from warm up and then the flow through progression through to whatever power or speed or strength stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we got it down to a pretty good science, like, because it works for what we do. We're rolling at
Hmm.
about 45, 50 minutes, giving them a little bit of freedom because they got to put on their equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So we come in, some sort of challenge or game. Might only be a couple minutes, like stacking cones or doing something with a tennis ball, or like who can
Hmm.
do this the longest, blah blah blah. Something to get them engaged. And over time, you get to know kids that they don't want anything to do with that. They just go and start their thing. But for the most part, they enjoy doing that. And then I like to layer in, just force expression stuff based on speed or generally what they need. So those muscular athletes probably need a bit more rapid ground contacts or expression of elastic energy. So we'll layer in one or two movements like that. Then a third that's something that they enjoy or they're good at, long ground contact, maybe a broad jump, something like that. So
Hmm.
they're getting exposed to some form of rapid RFD through 3 exercises at the beginning, and I stay consistent with that so that they understand the flow. They know they're coming in, they're doing this. It's almost like a little circuit, and then they go for it.
Yeah.
And then in classic sequential, you know, programming, like heavy and fast, depends if we're doing a high CNS versus a speed strength day, but typically your heavy, high eccentric or high load or tempo, whatever your heaviest CNS based movement first, and then we're kind of trickling down, keeping some form of hypertrophy in there almost all year just for tissue development and armoring, if you will.
Hmm.
And then we tried to never neglect the core, in some form of fashion, whether it's stabilizing, rotating,
Hmm.
carrying, flexion extension, whatever. But try to hammer that pretty hard because I think that's something gets left behind a lot as well. And in general,
Hmm.
that's a session. You know,
And
uh,
that's what, two to three times a week in season, or how much do you get with them?
obviously depends on game
Yeah.
schedule. Um, Perfect week is 3.
Yeah.
Because we get typically Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'll have them. And then Thursday, I like to give off. They have other activities, anyways. And
Hmm.
then they usually travel either Thursday or Friday. So it looks like they come in. We have a bit of a regen day, more tissue based day. So it's not going to accumulate too much central CNS fatigue. But we're still going to be pushing the needle forward. And plus, they're kids, they can handle a lot. Obviously, we
Yeah.
have to be careful there, but that's the approach.
Yep.
Tuesday, our heaviest day, full body, trying to check all the boxes of their needs, and then Wednesday alternates between, depending on time of year, when we have access to outside, because we get a bunch of snow for about 6 months here.
Yeah.
We're doing some form of SAQ, sprinting, conditioning to some degree, or our famous mental toughness Wednesdays, to some degree, and
Yeah.
that's once a week. Sometimes we get lucky and they don't travel, and then we can kind of get a couple extra sessions in, touch on some other things. But yeah, that's a typical week.
What are your programs in like 3, 4, 5 week blocks, or how do you kind of approach that?
This has changed over time as well. I used to go with the classic 3-1, 3
Yeah.
on, 1 reload. But what I've started to do is I've started to make my blocks in about 8 weeks. But what I use in season is like a double undulating style program. So you'd have a week A, and then you'd
Mhm.
have a week B, and then week A, week B. So we're still targeting the same physical qualities, just from a different angle or different exercise or modality. So you might have a heavy
Mhm.
squat 1 week and then a trap bar deadlift. So we're more or less getting that heavy bilateral strength emphasis, but it creates novelty and variety for the kids.
Mhm.
They enjoy it. It doesn't feel like they're always doing the same thing.
Mhm.
And yeah, but then off season, probably closer to the 4,
Yeah.
just hang on the physical quality and then go to the next.
Yeah, that's interesting. It I assume because of your situation and being in, a school where are most kids boarding, or at least, yeah. Um, versus, so even in if you just go, regular high school, public high school or something, there's so much variation with, kids coming in and out sometimes, just because, especially during the season, and like obviously you can write up the perfect annual plan or a periodized program or whatever it is, and the longer I do things, I'm like, man, they get enough deloads and rest weeks just from the times that they don't come for whatever reason. So I'm like, maybe we don't really need to build those in. They kind of, and I can't remember, I've heard a lot of coaches say it, which kind of helped me with my own thought process. So like, all right, maybe this is something that we can change. Because yeah, when I first started, fresh out of college, get your CSCS, all that sort of stuff, I was being as traditional, I guess, as it gets. And then the more exposure you get, the more athletes you work with, the more you learn. You're like, yeah, this is great for a book, but it might not be the best for my context or your context.
Oh, 100%. And I'd be a fool to say, like, yeah, I'd say 8 weeks, like that's how it's programmed. But like, we get into the bulk of training, especially after December, and like I might not see one team like more than once a week,
Yep.
or and then what do we do? Oh, 6 guys are hurt, or this, that, or the other, or you got to deal with this. This guy has to make up a test because of that, and
Yep.
you know, the name of the game is being adaptable. So there's a
Yeah.
plan, but I don't know how much we get to it,
Yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. Which is why, and I've also just come to the conclusion, like, even just exercise selection or something, it's like, man, I'm really racking my brain to find the best thing for the best possible outcome and all this stuff. And I'm like, at the end of the day, if I can get them to just be consistent, that's going to be the number one driver, and effort. Consistently showing up, consistently giving effort. That's the two most important things by far for how far outcomes go and how much kids improve and everything. I'm sure you found the same.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you could throw like anything at them and
Yeah.
they'll get better. I think there's far more nuances of consideration that have to be like considered, like their interaction with each other, interactions
Yeah.
with social media, and how we mitigate and educate in the right way. That has more precedence than like, what exercise are we doing. But and it's interesting because people get excited. Like, the things I post that people like are all the like meticulous plans, or like,
Yeah.
oh, how I plan for 3 different archetypes, and it's like, yeah, that's great, but like, doesn't
Yep.
change anything if Johnny shows up sick, or the coach cancels practice, or bag skates them when, you're not supposed to
Yep.
be.
And then you're just like damage limitations at that point. And you're like, all right,
Exactly.
here we go. What have you found? I'm actually interested to hear, speaking with your athletes and seeing how they are in the gym. what are some of the exercises that you think like, man, these are probably going to always stay in my pro, like the kids really like these, we get a lot out of them. Like what are some of those few exercises that you seem to get a lot out of that stay in your program, for most of the year?
Well, I know for me, in one way or another, like they're always getting the 6 movement patterns. Like they're getting
Yep.
squat, lunge, push, pull, whatever. We we
Yep.
know that. But specifically things they like, they're funny. Sometimes they like the really challenging things, like do a Turkish get up or like
Hmm.
a row press pull for dissociation, and but they really like pal off rotations and presses or wood chops, and like they're
Yep.
hockey players for the most part, so they're like, oh, I got to do rotation based stuff. I don't know. I think they've come to like the ISOs. I think
Okay. Yeah.
they get it and they pull, well, the ones that actually do it. I'm like, oh, this actually is pretty cool. I don't know. They're funny. Trap bar deadlifts are always cool because it's like, oh, I got
Yeah.
it's on there. It's
Yeah. 100%. Even I found similar with the ISOs, but especially obviously, I'm sure you have the same like kids coming in with some form of like knee tendon issue, like patellofemoral pain or tendonitis, whatever it is, and so they they can't train in our traditional way anyway. So then it's like, all right, well, cool. This is an opportunity. You're gonna hammer whatever it is, maybe just a split squat iso hold or some form of exercise that you or wall sit or anything like that. But to get that good adaptation, we're gonna need to build this up to a pretty long length of time. And I think if you just did that for some kids with when they're perfectly healthy, they're like, what am I doing? But
yeah.
when somebody has a pain and then that takes them out of the pain or doesn't feel the pain, but they still feel like they're doing something, it kind of flips a switch where they're like, oh, maybe this does do something.
Well, 100%. And anecdotally, this year we had we have a really good goalie, and he's got offers and this, that, and the other. But the first time he's ever had to deal with pain, knee and hip pain and this,
Hmm.
that, and the other. And they're always in these butterfly positions, and it's
Yep.
always tough, And anyways, he's going through this slump, and it's all in his head, and he's going to physio and everything, and they're saying do this, that, and the other. And it's tough because from our position, like we're not physiotherapists or we're
Hmm.
not ATs, and like we can't, like, I guess, legally give like prescriptions for certain things. But I said, look, this has gone on too long. We start using some quad extension ISOs. We're doing a couple different things, showing them different movements to improve some abduction strength, blah blah blah.
Yep.
And then that light bulb moment hits, like, oh, okay, I don't feel it anymore. Oh, okay, this is good. And then it's like, okay, I'll get back to track. Like, we got to get it stronger. Okay, I get it now. Blah blah blah. And
Yep.
you just got to show them, and as long as they trust, it works out. But
What do you think is, if you had to pick one or two kind of lowest hanging fruits that obviously we're being general here, but that most younger or undertrained athletes kind of have and should probably hammer on, what are those maybe one or two things?
that's a good question. I'd say play,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be your sport. Like, I'm seeing it like in real time now. It's like, where the heck are all the kids? Like, go out and play. Like, I just think about my own life growing up, and like I'd say I'm a pretty good generalist overall. You have many
Hmm.
moments where people are like, wow, how are you so good at all these sports? And it's like, I was a kid. Like, you go out
Yep.
and you play, you learn to throw this, that, or the other, and then once you learn all these things through trial and error, you have the tools to solve all these problems, right?
Yep.
And you're exposing yourself to the amount of trees and stuff I've climbed and fallen out of. It's like that.
Yep.
It doesn't seem like it has application, but it does when you have good balance, et cetera, or grip strength. It comes from this overexposure of just different stimuli all the time. So
Yep.
just as people go out, play, and if they're like hard pressed, like just play another sport, so you're ticking the box of doing something competitively. I'd say that's the lowest hanging fruit, is be a kid.
Yep.
And even if you're 25, you can still be a kid,
Yep.
like that. And I mean, it's always a tough pill to swallow, but like quality of movement is everything.
Yeah.
Just get those ankles mobile, get those hips mobile, squat ass to grass, and just like be super diligent in moving really well, because it's gonna pay off long term.
Yeah, and even going back to the play and everything you said with that, I just find the more I talk to younger athletes, I'm like, man, and I made a post about this the other day. I was like, man, sometimes like some sports just are not fun anymore. Like kids don't. It's just so rigid. So it's just about hard work, which this is in no way like hard work is important, effort is important, but also
Right.
I think that comes from because I know myself, I'm not like a militaristic or like authoritative like strength coach, like do what I do what I say. That's the only thing that goes. Get out if you don't like that sort of like. But the success I've had, I think, is because I just create an environment where I hope, obviously it's general again, but most kids that come to me want to do their best, want to do better, just because they're an environment where, and especially for some sports where it is such a rigorous training schedule and things like that. I was like, if I add another just rigorous, boring session that they have to go to every week, they're not going to give much. They're like they're not going to enjoy it. They're not going to want to do it. So it's like for me, that's always been the main driver is like, can I get kids to want to come to the gym? Like, I don't want your parents to have to force you to come. I don't want your coach saying you need to, like, I want you to want to come to the gym. So yeah, I just feel like sometimes we're getting too far away from like, at some point, if you take sport far enough, you play in college or professionally, like sport is your job. It will feel like a job. There will be a lot of ups and downs, but when you're 13, 14, 15 years old, like, you still be enjoying sport. You still be having fun. Like there's a reason that kids play sports, and then now there's a reason that everybody's dropping out of sports. But that's my little tangent.
Well, no, I'm right there with you, and I mean, there's a lot of things to touch on there,
Yeah,
but like this early specialization, and I mean, but it comes from a lot of times it's driven by the parents, and they see this opportunity and they want the best for the kids and etc. But like the oversaturation of one sport and the
yeah,
development process, like I'm also working with these kids that are like 10, 11 years old and they have parents there that are, yelling at them, you got to do this, apply yourself, blah, 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 blah. And it's like they're training super hard. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like you said, once it becomes a job, we all know that once you enter the real world and you get into the workforce, even if you have awesome jobs like we do, it's still taxing and it's like you
yeah,
want to be a kid again. So if you spend your whole bloody life prepping to maybe be a pro, and then you lose out on the play and the fun aspect of playing sports, which is the best part, the traveling,
yeah,
the sleepovers, blah blah blah. Like, man, that you don't get it back once it's your job. You
yeah,
know,
yep.
every second counts. So it's like, yeah.
And I'll say it is kind of. I haven't actually listened to like a full episode or anything, but I've seen a number of clips. I think like LeBron James and Steve Nash, whoever, might have their own podcast or something like that. But it's cool to see. Literally, yeah, you guys can argue all you want who's the greatest, but one of the greatest players of all time, who was, he was a dual sport athlete, talking about how much, and basketball is a highly skill based sport. So if somebody like him can play two sports essentially up until the time he, I assume, finished high school, and talk about the importance of playing different sports. Hopefully, it's not coming from people like us anymore. It's coming from athletes of names that people know. And it does work in the reverse, because every so often you'll get like the Tiger Woods comment or things like that. And it's like, yeah, he might have just played golf from the time he was 5 years old and done nothing else, but is he the anomaly or the rule? And then you just get into this whole dichotomy back and forth. But it is nice to see some more players kind of speaking out, so you do see how some of the best players in the world did get to where they are. But yeah, I think it'll always be a little bit of this side or that side versus just let the kids enjoy it.
Well, for sure. And I'll put stuff out sometimes that's like, if you want to make it to D1, you got to do this, this, this. You got to bench squat this. And obviously, it's a giant asterisk, but it's true.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, like, if you do want to be in that environment, you have to be able to do this. And then kids,
exactly.
well, what about this person and this person, this person? And it's like the reason they're the exception is because they're the exception.
Yeah,
All the top 1% of the top 1% are just like, we can't even really put them in the equation. But to
yeah,
have someone like LeBron, who actually, I think at the time in high school, he was more touted to be a football player than
yeah,
basketball player.
yeah,
Like for him to come out and say stuff like that,
yeah,
and other athletes, it's really important for the younger athletes to start seeing that and hearing that. And also on the gym side of things, people like, I don't know who it was. I think it was Gronk, JJ Watt coming out
hmm,
and saying, "Hey guys, like, look, like all I was forever was raw, squat and bench as deadlift as heavy as I can." Now they're like, I wish I had taken a bit more of a reductionist approach, a little
yeah,
less is more, and focus on just being strong enough and being as fast as possible, and I'd still be playing. It's like that's a good
yeah.
message. We need to be real as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important, especially for parents and young athletes, to be around people that have those mindsets. It's like, this is, this equation is not so, I often think about my system, my training system and everything. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, yeah, I guess it's a system, and I definitely have things, boxes that I'm ticking and whatnot, but it's so fluid as well. And like you said, it's, what does the athlete in front of me need to be at their best or to get better or whatever, that kind of thing that that's going to be the lowest hanging fruit for them. But it's not like, all right, day one we're coming in, we're doing this and that, then day two we're doing this and that, and then like a whole structured thing from the time they walk in to the time they leave 4 years later or whatever it is. But yeah, I don't know.
That's the way it goes. And just coaching sessions the other day, it was like I was working with an intern, and like they're all hot and ready to go, right? Like,
Yeah.
I want to buy this and the other. I was like, they're like, what are we gonna do today? And I was like, not that I said I didn't know, but I was like,
Yeah.
the general idea. We did a couple of the warm-up exercises, realized the kids weren't that into it, and then just started doing other stuff, and
Yep.
then enjoyed that. And it's like, well, we didn't do what we, well, that's the way it goes. We did what
Yep.
they needed, not what we planned on doing. So yeah, you gotta
Yep.
be hella fluid. Yeah.
That's how it goes. But anyway, I know you have a trip coming up and things I'm sure you got to do to get ready for it. So we will cut it there. But do you want to leave people kind of where they can find you or learn more about you or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess primarily at underscore ETX training, or just Josh Bray MSC on Instagram. Just drop me any DMs there. I have a website. I got a couple programs on there, but Instagram's the place, the hub. And yeah, that's it. That's all.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, man. This was fun.
Awesome. Thank you very much.